there's been a lot of talk about just how good Ausar Thompson has been for the Pistons. There's been a lot of talk about how good Jalen Duren has been for the Detroit Pistons, and rightfully so. But Cade Cunningham, let's not forget, has been completely insane for the Pistons. We're going to break down just how good he was in the month of February in today's episode, Locked On Pistons Podcast. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I am your host, Khahil. You can find me over on Twitter at Khahil. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. If you'd like to watch the Detroit Pistons games with me and the rest of the Pistons fan base, I'll link down below the playback room so you guys can join the playback room and watch all Pistons games with us, as well as some day streams breaking down some film. You can also check out my Substack where I'm now writing and posting articles over there daily for the Detroit Pistons. Yesterday, I wrote about Ausar Thompson changing the Pistons season, and today I dropped an article talking about how the Detroit Pistons are doing more than half the job and dove into how they are just plummeting teams that are worse than them. But go check that out. I'll link both those things down in the description below. Later on in the podcast, I want to talk about, does Troy Weaver, I cannot believe that I am talking about him again on the podcast, but apparently this is a talking point in the community, so I have to give my thoughts on it now. And I was asked to talk about it. So I guess we're going to talk about Weaver again. Does he deserve some credit for how the Pistons have played this year? And then also, there's been a lot of talk about Jaden Ivey for some reason, a lot of negativity around Jaden Ivey. I can't believe I'm going to be the one that has to come to his defense a little bit here. But we're going to do that later on in the podcast as well. But we're going to start off with, look, the last week and a half, I've spent multiple episodes on the podcast talking about how good Ausar Thompson has been. I mean, I just said I posted an article about breaking down just how he changed the Pistons season. And I do believe that's the case. Jalen Duren, we just talked about last episode. We've had multiple episodes the last few days, the last few weeks, talking about how great Jalen Duren has been. And that is true. But going through the last few episodes and going through the Pistons community and going through some of the content, the articles I'm seeing in the Pistons community, it honestly feels like that Cade's, and it's not that Cade's been forgotten, it's that it feels like we're kind of just we've gotten to a point where the Pistons community is kind of just accepted, and it's a great spot to be in. It's if you would have told Pistons fans they were in this position a year ago, I don't know how many of you would have believed it. But you're kind of in this position now where, oh yeah, that's Cade. Yeah, we expect that. That is what it is. We expect Cade to be a top 10 player. That's a nightly basis kind of thing. It's gotten to a point where I feel like the Pistons community has kind of, that's where they're at, which is again a good thing. But also doesn't mean we should stop talking about it. Because this is a dude, again, last year was leading a team that won 14 games, had everyone, not everyone, but a lot of people questioning whether he was actually a face of the franchise type of player. He had many people outside of Detroit questioning, was he, Cade talked about in an article when he was interviewed over the All-Star weekend. He talked about how he had sleepless nights over people calling him a bust. Was he actually as good as he thought he was? Like, this was just not even 12 months ago. It was, 8 months ago? 9 months ago that this was happening? Like, that it wasn't that long ago that this stuff was being talked about. It wasn't even a year. And now, fast forward to now, and Cade Cunningham is absolutely playing like a top 10 NBA player and just got done playing a February where I believe he was just robbed for Player of the Month. Now, he was a nominee. Donovan Mitchell ended up getting it. But you could argue that Cade Cunningham was 100% robbed for Player of the Month in February. And before we go into his numbers in February, I want to say as well, he's playing like an all-NBA second-team guy. Not just third team now. He is playing like a second-team all-NBA guy. He's playing outstanding. This is exactly, and the crazy and the scariest thing about this, I was talking with Coach Nick of B-Ball Breakdown, which you guys should be seeing a video about Cade coming soon. I might be in it. Who knows? And then also talking about with Jason Timpf on the last podcast, or 2 podcasts ago. The craziest thing about this is that Cade Cunningham still has room to grow. He still has room, plenty of areas to get better at. If he's already where he's at now, with all these areas that he can still get better at, where is he going to be in 2 years? Like, Pistons fans should be elated about having Cade Cunningham. But nonetheless, Cade Cunningham, in the month of February, put up monstrous numbers. Monstrous. 25.9 points a game. Basically 26 points a game. 10.1 assists a game. 5.5 rebounds a game. 1.3 steals. 45% from the field. 36.5% from beyond the arc on 6 attempts. He shot 93% from the free throw line and got to the free throw line 6.2 attempts this month per game and had a true shooting percentage of 57%. If Cade gets to the efficiency, which I fully expect him to eventually get there, but if he gets to the efficiency of 57, 58 true shooting percentage, where he's hovering around league average, slightly above league average efficiency for his position, good luck. Lights out. Lights out for the league if he gets there. Because the only area of Cade's game right now that really needs to be worked on is still his efficiency. He's not a good finisher around the rim as of right now. And he goes through little up and down shooting streaks where he's not the most efficient player still. Now he's having a career high season efficiency-wise. He's hovering right around 56 true shooting percentage. But if he can get around 57, 58, where he's consistently efficient, it's lights out for the league. And by the way, since the change of the new year, he's at 57 true shooting percentage. So he's been much more efficient this year than he has at any other point of his career. And it's going to continue to get better for him. The other crazy thing about Cade is that obviously the Pistons just got done winning 9 games this month. And we're on an 8-game winning streak. I don't know how Cade doesn't win Player of the Month with those type of monstrous numbers. Plus leading the Pistons to 8 straight games, 8 straight wins, I should say. And he doesn't get Player of the Month. And the other thing I want to point out it's crazy to look at, and crazy that this is where Pistons fans again, a year later, this is where you're at with this team. But we have now gotten to a point where a bad game for Cade, against Brooklyn on March 1st, 2 games ago. The talk of the town was Cade wasn't aggressive enough. Why is he not scoring the ball? Why is he not shooting the ball? What's going on, okay? In that game, he had 15 points, 9 assists, 7 rebounds, 4 of 9 shooting. Was the efficient night. Got to the free line 6 times. Was a plus 27. That is considered a low night for Cade. Another game against the Los Angeles Clippers. They won that game. But Cade wasn't that wasn't his most efficient game of his career. That wasn't the greatest game of his career. You want to know what his box score was that night? After the game, by the way, after that game, there was a lot of, Cade didn't even play his best game and they still won. That was a game in which Cade had 32 points, 9 rebounds, 7 assists. Got to the free throw line 10 times at 10 free throws. Or got to the free throw line 12 times at 10 free throws. That's what bad nights are starting to look like for Cade Cunningham. 9 of 19 against Chicago. Oh, not the greatest efficiency. Shot 2 of 7 from deep. Not the greatest. 29 points, 7 assists, 5 rebounds. Against Utah, this last game against Utah, for the majority of this game, as I'm watching it, I'm saying, Cade's not playing great. He's not having his best night. He can't get an outside shot to fall for his life. He could be so much better. He's not having his best game. And at the end of the night, in 30 minutes, he has 29 points, 9 assists, 4 steals on 24 from the field, 4 from the free throw line. This is what bad nights look like for Cade Cunningham now. This is what slow nights look like for Cade now. And it's good. It's a good thing to look at to say Pistons fans have gotten to the point where it's just oh yeah, that's just another Cade Cunningham night. We expect him to be a top 10 guy. But I don't want us to get to a point. I don't want the Pistons community to get to a point where I don't want to say taken for granted, but you're kind of just, because you expect it, you're not talking about it as much. So Asar and Jalen Duren, they've deserved all the talk of the town the last few. They've been exceptional. 100%, they've been great. But don't get confused. You are watching a top 10 player in the NBA right now on your Detroit Pistons. That's the kind of player you are watching on this team. He is playing outstanding. He's playing at a level that he's never had or he's never been at any other point of his career. And right before I started recording this, Nick Wright of First Things First, you guys know I've said this a few times on the podcast. I think First Things First is the best sports show on television right now. Love it. It's super funny. I enjoy watching it. I watch it almost every single day. And honestly, I think they say some smart stuff outside when there's bias involved. When bias is not involved, I actually think it's really good commentary. But anyways, Nick Wright had his King of the Hill ranking NBA players this year. He had Cade Cunningham top 10. It looked like he had him 8th if you read it left to right. That's the kind of respect Cade is getting across the league now. You guys are getting to watch a future bona fide superstar. It's going to be absolutely tremendous for the next 5 to 7 years, maybe, hopefully even longer of his career. I mean, at that point, he'd only be 30. Yeah, definitely way longer than that. This is just the start. He has so much more room to grow, and he's already great. And he's already leading the Pistons to fighting for home court advantage in the playoffs. Don't take Cade for granted, man. He has been otherworldly for the Pistons this year. This has been absolutely tremendous. So let me know in the comment section down below how you guys feel about Cade Cunningham's season and how you feel about how he played in the month of February, where he just put up monstrous numbers. Let me know. Comment section down below or over on Twitter at Khahil. When we come back, guys, I didn't think, I'm honestly shocked that this is becoming a talking point and something I have to address that people want me to address. But we're going to talk about it, I guess. I'm shocked. Does former GM Troy Weaver deserve credit for what's going on with the Pistons season this year? We'll talk about it when we come back. Running a small business means you're wearing a lot of hats. Your personal phone becomes your business phone, and before you know it, you're juggling customer calls day and night. As your team grows, it becomes impossible to manage everything with just your personal number. That's where Open Phone comes in. It's the #1 business phone system designed to help you keep your work and personal life separate. For just $15 a month, the cost of a few coffees, you get complete transparency and visibility into everything happening with your business phone number. Open Phone works through an app on your phone or computer and integrates with tools like HubSpot and hundreds of others. It also uses AI-powered call transcripts and summaries, so you'll have a rundown of your calls and action items the second you hang up. And if you miss a call, no problem. Automated messages are sent directly to your customer, ensuring you never miss an opportunity to engage. Right now, OpenPhone is offering 20% off your first 6 months when you go to openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That's OPENPHONE.com/LockedOnNBA for 20% off 6 months. Openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. Again, at openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. If you want to watch Pistons games with me and the rest of the Pistons fan base, I'll link the Playback Room down below where we watch all the Pistons games together. And we also have day streams where we break down film and do other fun stuff. So join that if you haven't already and you're interested in it. Also, you can check out the Substack where I've been writing articles daily. Talked about Sarah Thompson impacting the Pistons season, and then talked about today how the Pistons are just plummeting teams worse than them. We also have a deal going on, 50% off, $3 a month to get all the content over on the Substack. So if you're interested in any of that, I'll link it all down below for you. All right. I am, like I said earlier, I am absolutely appalled, flabbergasted, confused, shocked, whatever word you want to use, that in the Lord of our Savior 2025, March 2025, that somehow, some way, the GM of a team that won 14 games, the GM of a team that had the worst season in Pistons history, the GM of a team that had me getting interviewed by news stations in England, in Australia, about how crazy the Pistons losing streak was. That GM, I have to now come on here and talk about in the middle of a season where the Pistons are about to be in the home court advantage in the Eastern Conference Finals. Somehow he's being brought up again. For the last week and a half or so. And I guess Stephen A. Smith really put gasoline on this fire because he went on First Take. And, of course, anytime the Pistons get talk about them, it can never just be about their play. It has to be some BS going on. Stephen A., instead of talking about Cade Cunningham and all these other dudes, he decided to go on there and talk about how Troy Weaver deserves credit. Okay, so apparently Weaver has buddies going. He has connections running deep, and trust me, I should have known that because. But I'm shocked that this is something we have to talk about, and so many of you guys want me to talk about this. I'm actually shocked about this. So the question is, does Weaver deserve credit for how the Detroit Pistons are playing this year? The short answer for me is hell no. He does not deserve credit for what's happening this year. And I'm going to explain why. I guess in order to explain why, you have to start off with why people want to give him credit. People want to give him credit because he drafted these players, right? He drafted Cade, he drafted Asar, he drafted Duran, he drafted Stu, he drafted Ivy. People want to give him credit because these are his players, right? Let's just break this down real quick. If you were a listener of this podcast during Weaver's entire time as the general manager, you know that there were many things, and we're going to go through them, trust me. There were many things that he did not do right. Obviously, the team won 14 damn games. Like, there was many things he did not do right. But let's start with what he didn't do right. Number one, people seem to just forget that he got rid of Luke Kennard and Bruce Brown for pennies on the dollar. Like, got rid of them for pennies on the dollar. Both of them are contributing for contenders right now. Or Bruce won a championship for a championship team. Luke is currently contributing for a contender right now. Got rid of both of them for pennies. We had James Edwards on the podcast this summer. Or was it this summer when he... Yeah, it was this summer when he came on, talked about how the reason why the Pistons may have had to include 4 second-round picks in that trade with Luke Kennard just to get that mid-first round pick was because of a mess up on their end. So that's there you go. That's number one. That was within the first offseason. He drafted Killian. So, and that's a miss. Now, before we go in on his draft stuff, I do want to make it clear, and we'll get to some of the positives, I guess, but I do want to make it clear. He did bat better than average on draft picks, and the draft is a crapshoot, so missing on Killian was big, but he did hit on other players. We'll get to that. Just let me finish. But he missed on Killian. He used those picks he traded for to get Saddiq Bey, who he then traded for James Wiseman because he was upset that he couldn't get Evan Mobley, or he wanted his Evan Mobley. So he spent the next few years chasing his Evan Mobley in Marvin Bagley, who he gave an extension immediately in the offseason when he was betting against nobody else. He was betting against nobody else, gave him a 3-year guaranteed contract of $13 million. Marvin Bagley is struggling to get minutes on any team, and he's currently on the Washington Wizards, I believe. Let me go ahead and just double check that. I believe he's on the Wizards unless he got traded. I want to confirm this. Oh yeah, he did. He got traded to the Grizzlies. But he's currently struggling to crack consistent minutes for teams. That was the dude he gave 3 years immediately to. So, there you go with that. That again, immediately he did that. So that's another problem he did. This past offseason, didn't make any moves and walked into the season with Alec Burks, Bojan Bogdanovic, and the corpse of Joe Harris, who retired the offseason after as the team's veterans to help this team move forward. You saw them win 14 games because of it. You watched him hold Jeremy Grant past his peak value, where he was rumored to be worth 2 first-round picks for a team. Held him past that value, then ended up trading him off for a distant first-round pick. Held Bojan way past his value, and ended up getting nothing for him. Held Burks way past his value, and ended up getting basically nothing for him because of what he did trade them for was Quinn Grimes, who then was shipped off in the offseason 2 months later because he didn't want to be in Detroit. So you basically got nothing for those assets. His asset management was horrible throughout his entire time with the Detroit Pistons. It was so bad, by the way, his asset management as the GM of this team. It was so bad that Trajan Langdon spent about 50% of his press conference and spent more than 50% of every interview after that press conference talking about how the Pistons have no assets compared to other rebuilding teams and how he wants to spend the next year or so trying to acquire assets so they can then make moves down the line. That's how bad the Pistons were in asset management during Troy Weaver's time, is that the new president of basketball operations spent more than 50% of all his interviews talking about how badly they need to go get assets because the previous regime got none. All of that combined into one tells you why he does not deserve a lot of credit at all for this team succeeding this year. And again, I want to make this clear to people, and we'll get into some of the positives because I know people want to hear the positives. But when you are a GM, because the positives are going to be the guys he drafted, which we'll get to in a minute, but when you are the GM, you are not the scout team. You are not the scout. Your job is not just who you draft, which, by the way, has a lot to do with your scout team as well, but you are not just the lead scout on your team. You are the head of everything involving your basketball team. Free agent signings, trades, salary cap stuff, asset management, everything involving that. Not to mention, we won't go too deep into this, but some of the people that were in the front office that, I don't want to go too deep into this, but there were some things that people know what I'm referencing. That happened during your time in the all of that stuff goes into what you are responsible for as the GM. All of that. It's not just who you draft. You're not just if you just want to give people credit for who they draft, go be a scout. Go be a scout. Don't be a GM. Because GM, you're not just the drafter. You are everything with your basketball team. So all of that stuff, and I could go on more and more. The last thing I'll say before we get into the positives, a year ago, people were talking about whether they needed to trade Ivy, whether they needed to trade Duren, whether either one of them was good. Was Asar and Duren able to fit together? Were they ever going to be able to play together? How stupid it was. I got laughed at. For the Pistons in our Locked On NBA mock draft for drafting Asar Thompson because so many people thought, how could that work with Troy Weaver and the way they've built this team? This would be terrible. And then last year they won 14 games and everyone felt right because of it. No, the way people feel about the Pistons' young core right now was not how they felt a year ago. People are forgetting the talks that we were having a year ago because of how poorly that season was going. The reason why people are feeling as high as they are right now everywhere, not just in Detroit, everywhere about this young core is because of what Trajan, Langdon, and JB Bickerstaff brought to this team and helped develop them into and surrounded them with the right pieces, which is what you're supposed to do as a head of a basketball franchise. So anyways, now we'll move on to the things he did well, which was quite literally just draft these guys. And look, does he deserve credit for drafting Cade? No. I'm not giving him credit for drafting Cade. Cade was the obvious pick, and there's been rumors about whether he even actually wanted Cade, whether he wants someone else. Now, if we're going to put all bias aside, if you would have ended up going with Mobley, Pistons fans probably would be sitting here saying that was a fine pick because Mobley is freaking fantastic too. Like, Cade and Mobley are two insane picks to get from one draft. So, I won't even kill him for that. But it's not like Cade was his overwhelming favorite here, okay? Cade was the obvious pick at number one. He was the consensus number one. He doesn't get credit for that. Jaden Ivey, I wish people knew certain things that happen behind the scenes. All I'm going to say is I'm not giving him credit for Ivey. One, because everybody wanted Ivey. Everyone wanted Ivey once he fell to 5. People were worried about him whether he was going to go to 4. But everyone wanted, most people, not me, but most people wanted Ivey at 5. But if you want to give him credit for Ivey, sure, go ahead. The picks that I will actually give him some credit for is trading up to get Jalen Duren, which, again, look, we're going to be fair. Literally 2 months ago, people were talking about whether Duren was going to need to come off the bench. Now, he's completely turned the season around. We've talked about nonstop how fantastic he's been. But literally just 3 months ago, people were talking about whether he should be starting still. But, okay, we want to give him credit for the Duren pick. He did have to trade up and get him in the middle of the first round. That's a good pick. The Asar pick, I'll give him credit on because that was not a gimme pick. There was a lot of people who just didn't want Asar. So drafting Asar, and he said he was going to hit that one out the park, give him credit on. He drafted Asar. You want to give him credit for Stu for going in the middle of the first round getting him? Sure. I look at it differently a little bit. You could have just drafted Stu, not drafted Sadiq Bey, and given up a first-round pick that then tied you up for the next 4 years, or really the next 5-6 years that you gave up to get Stu. You could have just drafted Stu instead of drafting Sadiq, who you then traded for James Wiseman, who was a bust, instead of getting, but anyway, you want to give him credit for identifying Stu in the middle of the first round? Sure, go ahead. I'll give him credit for that. So if you want to give him credit, what credit would I give him? Like maybe 10%? Like maybe 10 to 15%, simply because he was able to. He drafted these guys, which is fair. He drafted these guys. They were drafted under his leadership. Sure. Fair. Fair enough. However, that's not the only job you have as a GM. That's not the only job you have as part of a GM. Everything else he was horrible at. And again, people as recently as this offseason were asking, is Cade a franchise guy? Should you really be building a team around him? Is Jaden Ivey good? Is Jalen Duren a starting center? Can Asar Thompson develop any offensive game? Is he actually going to be a usable player? Can Jalen Duren and Asar Thompson fit together? Like, that was the conversations being had as recently as this past offseason because of what happened last year and how poorly the roster was put around him and the product they were able to put on the floor. That was all directly to Weaver. That's the team he put on the floor. So, I'll give him 10 to 15%, I guess, because he drafted the dudes. But this season has went this well because Trajan Langdon got JB Bickerstaff. He signed Malik Beasley for $6 million. Best value signing in the NBA like the last however long. Brought in THJ, a move that was criticized at the time, and now we all looked wrong who criticized it. THJ. Brought in Tobias, who people, again, criticized at the time, didn't like how much money they paid to him. Now Tobias has been great, especially since January for him. Trajan built this team and supported them with the exact perfect locker room and the exact perfect veterans to help them take the next level. This is Trajan. This is Trajan Langdon and JB Bickerstaff. This is not Troy Weaver. This is Trajan Langdon and JB Bickerstaff. If you want to give him 10% for drafting these players, sure, fair enough. But anything more than that is crazy, and the fact that he's even coming up in talks, and we're wanting to talk about him during a fantastic season the Pistons are having, of nothing but optimism, and instead of giving enormous credit to Trajan Langdon and talking about him as Executive of the Year, we hear talking points about Troy Weaver really should be given credit. You guys need to be talking about Troy Weaver. No, we don't. He was the GM of the worst season in Pistons history. Cade was being questioned as the franchise. I host a daily podcast, bro. I see the thousands of comments. I get the DMs. All offseason, I had so many people telling me Cade was not him. He was not the franchise player. Building around him was going to be stupid. Like, that was what people felt like because of last season. And that last season happened because of this team that Troy Weaver put around them. Like, no. And lastly, this segment ran way too long. People say he didn't want Monty, so he shouldn't get blamed for that. First of all, what I heard at the time was, yes, Monty was not his number one option, but it wasn't like he was against Monty. He liked getting Monty. Monty was like his second option. They went after Monty. Monty said no. They said, okay, I'll move on to my number one option again, which was Kevin Ollie, by the way, who was back out the NBA after being on an assistant coaching staff. Back out the NBA. That would have been a disaster too, by the way. A guy who hasn't... I can't... You know what? We're wrapping up here. I cannot believe that you guys forced me into doing this again. No, he gets nothing more than 10% of the credit for drafting these guys. That is it. Everything else is Trajan Langdon, JB Bickerstaff, and these personal players' improvements themselves. It's not Troy Weaver. That's all I've got for you guys today. Or not. I lied. See, you guys got me wanting to wrap up the episode. When we come back, wow, this segment lasted really long. Nick, David, don't get mad at me. I just got heated. I'm sorry. I'm going to defend Jaden Ivey a little bit and talk about this Ivey talk that's going on in the community. Again, the team's winning so much. Happy season, incredible time. But somehow, instead of talking about the team currently, I see so many people talking about Ivey and what they're going to do in the future. That shouldn't even be a talking point, but I'm going to defend Ivey a little bit here when we come back. Who's in your support system? We all need people to lean on, whether it's friends, family, mentors, or professionals. Even the strongest leaders and athletes know that asking for help makes them better. Therapy is one of the best ways to build a strong support system. It's not just for tough times. It helps with setting boundaries, developing coping skills, and becoming the best version of yourself. I've seen firsthand how viable it is to have support system that keeps you grounded and motivated. Oh my God, I'm sorry for that alarm going off. Therapy isn't just about crisis moments. It's a tool for self-improvement, stress management, and navigating life's challenges. Build your support system with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. Build your support system with BetterHelp. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review. Whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on, Another great way to support the podcast and all that other stuff. You guys get it. I've said it to you guys many times, whatever. All right, at the end of the podcast here, we don't got much time. Jaden Ivey. So I've seen a lot of talk about Jaden Ivey. Does he fit with this team? Are they way better without Jaden Ivey? Does he even have a place on this team anymore? Who should they be trading him for? What picks do you want to attach Jaden Ivey to? And this is where I'm at with it. Look, and the crazy thing is that I've been labeled by a lot of people in the community as the Jaden Ivey hater, which, it's fine with me. When you host a daily podcast and you're talking every day and you're giving analysis, stuff like that's going to happen. I get it, whatever. So I don't have much of a problem with it. But I'm going to come to the defense of Ivey here. Ivey was playing much better before he went down. He was playing much better. Was he perfect? No. Does he have plenty of areas to improve on? No. And as much as some Pistons fans are so insanely high on him that they believe he's going to be a star, whereas I maybe think that his future role at this team may be as a sixth man, nonetheless, though, Ivey has proven to me that he can be an impact player and that he has a role in this team. And maybe it is as a starter. I think there's no questions about whether he fits with this lineup. You just simply take THA out for Jaden Ivey, and then you have the defense with Asar Thompson. You even have more athleticism on the floor. You probably run even more so in transition, in fast breaks, and you have more dynamic playmaking with the ball in their hands to add on to Asar, to Duran, to Cade when you put Ivey in there. The only question I guess that you have for Ivey if you replace him with THA is Ivey doesn't really provide the same kind of movement shooting gravity that THA has, and that does bring different levels of gravity when you're trying to start two guys who are also non-shooters. So I get that, but that's not a big enough question to where you have to be sitting here wondering, well, does Ivey even fit with these guys? Yes, he would fit. It would be fine. Okay, that's first. Second, like I mentioned earlier, Ivey has proven to me, even if I believe the role for him and his impact is going to be lower than maybe other fans who think he can be a superstar or an all-star, he's proven to me nonetheless that he's going to be an impact player for this team or can be an impact player for this team. I don't have questions about whether this team is better with or without Ivey. They obviously would be better right now with Ivey. Again, it doesn't matter what role I think he would be best in. The idea of that they're just better without him on the team or better without him in the rotation is crazy to me. They're 100% would be better if they had Ivey in this rotation. Like, that's crazy to me. That's second. Third, even if you don't, because this is part of the conversation I've seen, even if you don't want to extend him this offseason because of the injury, that's fine. He's a restricted free agent. Doesn't mean you're giving up on him. It doesn't mean that you're not going to bring him back. You just go into the restricted free agency. If he plays well next year, then you pay him what he deserves. The idea that, okay, well, if you don't extend him this offseason, you have to trade him, I don't agree with that. If you don't extend him, then you just play him next year. If he plays well and he improves, then you pay him what he's worth in restricted free agency. Like, it's simple as that to me. And the last thing I'm going to say with Ivey, I think that with the way this team is playing this year, and with how good they're playing right now, and where they're heading, there should not be conversations right now. In the offseason, sure. But there definitely should not be conversations on March 4th when the Pistons are right behind the 4th seed about whether they need to trade Ivey and picks in the offseason for another star. That, just live in the moment. Enjoy what this team is giving you right now. See how far this team can get you. Be happy about the development this team is getting or having. Be excited about this whole season in general. There's no need to have these conversations about, oh, you need to get rid of Ivey. Why? Why do that right now? All that stuff can stay for the offseason. If you want to have those conversations, wait till then. But there's no need to be trying to talk about moving Ivey at this point in the season when they're playing this well. That shouldn't even be a thought process. It's the same thing I talk about with the Weaver segment. Why is that even on people's minds with how good this team is right now? With how good they're playing, where they're at in the season. This shouldn't even be a talking point. So, look, again, like I said, I know I've been labeled the Jaden Ivey hater by a lot of people, and that's fine. But I had to come to his defense a little bit here because he had improved this year. He did look a lot better. He was improving in multiple areas. He did prove to me that he can be an impact player on this team, and they're better with him in the rotation. If they had him in the rotation right now, they would be a better basketball team. The idea that they wouldn't be, or I don't know if they would be good with Jaden Ivey. They might be just better subtraction by addition, or addition by subtraction. I messed that up. But I don't think any of that is true, and the fact that these are conversations being had, I think, are disingenuous and shouldn't really be talked about right now because of how good this team is right now. Let Ivy get back healthy. We'll see what happens. But, like, I don't get why that's being talked about. I feel like that's kind of unfair to Ivy, and it's unfair also to the team, what they're doing right now. That should be the talking point. But that's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. Subscribe to the Playback Room as well. Subscribe to the Substack. We will get daily content from me as well. Until next time, I'll see you guys later. Stay safe out there. And until next time, peace out, everybody.